I'd call this meeting to order, please. Sego, bonsoir, good evening, and welcome to the March 28th council meeting. I'd like to have a moment of personal reflection, please. Thank you. Please stand for our national anthem, Canadian national anthem.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. Car ton bras sait porter l'épée, il sait porter la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Please continue standing. Please continue standing. We're going to listen to the national anthem of Ukraine. Thank you. The acting mayor for this month is Councillor Todd Bennett. We acknowledge that we are gathering on the traditional territory of the Mohawk people of Akwesasne. Roll call.
Mayor Glenn Grant.
Present.
Councillors Claude McIntosh.
Present.
Dennis Carr. Sid Gardner.
Ici.
Dean Hollingsworth.
Present.
Caroline Hébert.
Présente.
Councillors Maurice Dupel.
Present, Madam Mayor.
Elaine McDonald.
Present.
Todd Bennett.
Present.
Justin Towndale.
Present.
Éric Bergeron.
Present.
All present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any additions, deletions, or amendments to the council agenda?
I have one addition, Mr. Mayor, and that is the addition of a resolution 2022-06, Stand with Asians Coalition Initiative.
Could I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Councillor Bennett, Councillor McDonald, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Any disclosure of interest for this evening's meeting? I have a motion to go in committee of the whole. Councillor McIntosh, Councillor Gardner, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Motion to adopt the minutes of the February 28th meeting. Councillor Bennett, Councillor McDonald, all in favor? Opposed, carried. Presentations.
Our first presentation this evening will be made by Mr. Mayor, and that is the week of mourning for city employees. And I just want to let everyone know that the Cornwall flag has been lowered at all our locations for this week.
Jean-Paul Fortin. Jean-Paul worked for the city of Cornwall from 1982 to 2009 when he retired. Rael Menard. Rael worked for the city of Cornwall from 1980 to 2019 when he retired. And Al Visiconis. Al worked for the city of Cornwall from 1979 to 1984 when he retired. Edgar Lapointe. Edgar worked for the city of Cornwall from 1974 till the time he retired. Stephen Rand. Steve was an employee of the city of Cornwall since 1989. Gary Woods. Gary was an employee of the city of Cornwall since 1993. Doug Seller. Doug worked for the city of Cornwall from 1975 to 1998 when he retired. Lee Shoemakers. Lee worked as an employee of the city of Cornwall since 2006. Glenn Grant. Glenn worked for the city of Cornwall from 1975 to 2007 when he retired. William Wilson. Bill worked for the city of Cornwall from 1974 to 1994 when he retired. Francis Lozo. Francis worked for the city of Cornwall from 1969 to 2003 when she retired. Theodore Lalone. Theodore worked for the city of Cornwall from 1974 until the time he retired. Francis Roy. Francis worked for the city of Cornwall from 1964 to 1994. Robert Bilmer. Robert worked for the city of Cornwall from 1979 to 2003 when he retired. Bob Kilger. Bob was mayor of the city of Cornwall from 2007 to 2014.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our next presentation is Tourism Development Corporation of Cornwall by Etienne Saint-Aubin. And we have Amy Mallion here, who's going to be projecting Mr. Saint-Aubin on our screen.
Sorry, we're having a bit of difficulty with Etienne being heard. Okay, we're all set.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, I deeply appreciate this opportunity to present to you this year's annual report on behalf of the Tourism Development Corporation. May I say that I am humbled to be speaking following the memorial, which has commemorated and honored those who gave their best so that we could be our best. And so I wanted to leave with you uppermost this thought. There are no limits to what we can do as a community when we see the opportunity to put forward our best work. And let it be clear, this program, this tourism development program, which showcases our community and contributes to our shared sense of pride, exists. The council today acted to help a greater role in this crucial field of tourism, with the options provided to us by a municipal accommodation tax of 4% is imposed on stays at facilities in Cornwall. This tax, relatively modest in comparison to that in effect in North America. Now, half of those funds are used to fund the tourism, thus reduced to the city. And the other half is through a grant program, which is administered by the board of directors of this corporation. It operates at arm's length. Close to 100,000 has been contributed this year. Now, this three-member board of directors is comprised of Dale Allen, Karen Torrey Racine, and myself. I can confirm that no pressure was exerted upon us and that operated this year. Remember, Chantal Baudet stepped down because of her duties that consist of health. We will miss her very much. We have appointed a long-standing, well-served member of our volunteer advisory committee, Karen Toy, to the board. And besides Karen, the advisory members this year, Carol Ann Baxter, Amanda Brisson, Don Virginia Lake, Art Lecky, Robert Prowl, Francis Somerville, Stephanie Tom, and Chantal François. Dennis Sebel and Lily Worrell will be joining this august group this year. We have appreciated the able assistance of individuals, as we have this Amy Mallion coordinator. Now, despite the imposed by this event, we've been able to fund 12 and many new enterprises with an ongoing 4-year contribution. Communities are totaling $100,000. In a sense, as a spring of greater activity, our funding has helped and is helping new growth to flourish in our community. In closing, I want to highlight one particular project which we're helping come to fruition and which I believe stands out, illustrating what it is that we're. It is a living history project, historical society. And it will bring to life the French solidarity, indigenous people, the loyalists, French, who were, to all extent, the pillars, the fountains of what we enjoy, the people live. And so, tourism, let us continue to appreciate what we as a community to counter things, shine an even better community. Mr. Mayor, members of council, it is an honor to be working through you on behalf of our community. And I believe that you have built this whole enterprise, which is operating, as I believe, can be a model for the province. Eastern Ontario, and more particularly Cornwall, way in the regards. Thank you.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Etienne, can you hear me?
Yes, unfortunately, technology isn't
Right. It's great while it works, eh? And then when it doesn't, it's not so great. So I'm going to turn my back to you and speak into the microphone for your sake. You'll hear me. I noted that you began your remarks by saying there are no limits. And I mean, a year or two ago, I might have taken that as a euphemism and a very positive opening remark. But I have to tell you now that that is proving to be true on the ground. There really are no limits to where we're going as a community and how well we're doing in terms of our tourism and what great support that the organization that you represent is doing for us and the support you're giving. It's paying off dividends, as you know, just if you walk down Main Street. Now, I appreciate the fact that not every single agency that you support is strictly working only in Cornwall, and I'm really happy about that, and I'm just wondering if that in any way presented a challenge to you. Like, for example, Apples and Arts. I'm sure most of the venues are here in Cornwall, but it's all over the United Counties, and I wonder if that was a challenge for you to be able to support an organization like that. Obviously, if it was a challenge, you conquered the challenge, and we're all the better for it, but I am curious.
Thank you for that. I can tell you that it is sort of like the circle of life. The stays that are generated in Cornwall, the hotel facilities or B&B or Airbnb and so on, from events that may take place and are funded by us that would evolve outside of Cornwall into SDNG. This all really accrues to our community as a benefit. Persons will come to us to stay, come to us to partake of the food outlets and so on. So it's all, again, one great circle of life.
Yes. Yes, I appreciate that. Certainly with the food outlets, they're opening all the time downtown. It's been wonderful. And I have a question for you. You remarked at the end that you were working on supporting the Living History Project. Now, is that something you're doing in conjunction with the Community Museum? Because we did hear something about that from Mr. Lemoyne earlier, and I'm wondering if that is an activity that's going to happen in Lamoureux Park, or is it something else?
Yes, I'm sure the organizers will be announcing this more effectively than they can. But I can tell you that we are very much enthused by this. I believe that the whole community will be, and that a great number of visitors from many parts of the province and outside will be coming to our community as a result of this. I understand that it will be held during the Long Beans Thursday weekend, and so it's something very much to look forward to very soon.
Right, and we're all looking forward to it. I expect it can fill Lamoureux Park. Well done, and thanks for all you do.
Councillor McIntosh, then Councillor Gardner.
Thank you again for the presentation. I say this more than tourism, it really enhances the quality of life in Cornwall, many of these projects. Regarding the accommodations, the hotel industry and that, do you get feedback from them? Are they saying this is really worthy, good projects, it's helping us?
I am hoping that I've understood your question correctly, and I may not have heard it as well as I have. But we are back up into more normal circumstances of the number of days, and certainly our hoteliers have been particularly effective at drawing visitors to Cornwall in their own enterprise fashion. So we are seeing, as a result, a growing amount of resulting tax. I hope I've understood.
Okay, I was just quizzing you on feedback from the industry. We're 2 or 3 years into this. I know it's been 2 difficult years.
Experienced a tough time, or the whole industry experienced a tough time, and so it had a cumulative effect. The revenues from tax were down over the past 2 years, and they're on the increase now again. So the trends will be positive. The community fared reasonably well, comparatively, I hope, in terms of days during the pandemic, but we're right back to much healthier.
The last time you talked to us, I think you mentioned something, that possibility of looking at a big ticket item, if that's the word I'm just wondering if what's coming up in May involving the museum, would you regard that as a big draw, a big ticket item?
May I ask, Amy, if you could just repeat the question, so I have a sense of what's been asked?
The last time you spoke to us, you talked about the possibility of examining the idea of a big ticket item, something, a major draw. And I'm just wondering if the museum project in May qualifies as what you call a big ticket item.
Thank you. I'm glad that you like that, which I didn't this year, but I can say. One, we continue to put money aside. In other words, there's a separate reserve growing for this sort of anchor tourism project whose nature we don't know yet. It is yet to be presented to us. But it is a thing which is going to be, funding will be set aside to be of more significance than the funding that we normally attribute. Our usually, the absolute right now, funding that is $25,000, just to be able to be fair, to spread positive of the particular project of note is not funded on the basis of being kind of an anchor. The anchor project will hopefully be a permanent facility. Some will be a permanent draw to the community. Might help in a modest way to spur on that kind of creativity for anyone who might have an idea about something like that.
Thank you.
Councillor Gardner.
Bonsoir, Monsieur Saint-Aubin, Sid Gardner. I know you're doing good work, and your crew is helping you raise money for different institutions. My question to you is, if you have the answer available close by, how many institutions or groups were you able to help in this past year? If you have a list available, fine. If not, it's important to me, if you have a committee with people who are raising money to help others, to let you know, or let the people know, the public know, what you've done for those people and how many groups did you help?
We have the inventory of applicants. this year we awarded funds to 12 out of 15 applicants. Unfortunately, we can't always give funds to all applicants, but we have to administer this fund prudently. I can tell you that hotel owners, B&B, inns, Airbnb are very faithful in providing through to the city their proceeds from the accommodations. We don't seek any other funding than that is our exclusive funding, and our purpose is solely to reinvest those tax proceeds into the community, like watering a garden.
But what's important to me, Mr. Saint-Aubin, is the projects that you supported. They're up on our board now, and I would really like to see them listed or heard by the public that's listening to this meeting tonight, so that they know what kind of important work you're doing.
Well, we're certainly doing our best, number one, to help who are with their application, make sure that the wording, the bureaucratic process is not going to be preventing them from applying. We post on our website information about just who we funded. All the criteria worked very carefully this year, as last year. We're going to improve upon this again. We're going to work to keep the potential aware of how they are to apply, what criteria. We're looking for perfect transparency and clarity about what it is that people need to do to receive funding.
Thank you, Mr. Saint-Aubin. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, actually, on behalf of City Council and the community, I want to thank you and your committee for the work you've done in the past year, and continue with that good work, because it's making our community much more aware to outsiders, as well as bringing people into our community. So that's what we want. We want visitors in our community. So thanks again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all. Thank you. Bye.
MCAO.
On our consent agenda, we have a few proclamations. The first one is recommended that Council proclaim Tuesday, May 10th, 2022, as the Day of Action Against Anti-Asian Racism in the City of Cornwall. That Council proclaims Saturday, April 23rd, 2022, as Eco Day in the City of Cornwall. That Council proclaim the month of March 2022 as Multiple Myeloma Awareness Month in the City of Cornwall. That Council proclaim the month of April 2022 as Parkinson's Awareness Month, and Monday, April 11th, 2022, as World Parkinson's Day in the City of Cornwall. And that Council proclaims Saturday, April 2nd, 2022, as World Autism Day in the City of Cornwall. 2021 Annual Remuneration and Expense Statement, with a recommendation that Council receive the 2021 Statement of Remuneration and Expenses paid to members of Council in accordance with Section 284 of Municipal Act 2001. Non-competitive procurement for raw water transmission main pipe wall condition assessment, with a recommendation that Council approve the non-competitive procurement to undertake the raw water intake main inspection by Pure Technologies from Mississauga for a total of $461,013.56, excluding HST. Purchase of 2020 new paramedic response units, with a recommendation that Council approve the purchase of 3 paramedic response units from Roland Emergency Vehicle Products Incorporated from Mississauga at a total price of $327,863.85, including HST. Purchase of transit bus through the Transit Procurement Initiative, with a recommendation that Council approve the purchase of 1 conventional hybrid bus from Nova Bus through the Metrolinx Transit Procurement Initiative process, purchase of 3 replacement ambulances for paramedic services, with a recommendation that council approve the purchase of 3 ambulances from Crestline Coach Limited from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, at a total estimated price of $960,119, excluding HST. Tender 22-T06, supply and delivery of various medical products for paramedic services, with a recommendation that tender 22-T04 be awarded for a 2-year period with the option to renew for an additional 1-year term as per the schedules 1 through 9 as outlined in this report. Awarded items for EMRN totaled $280,433.81. Medline Canada Corporation totaled $107,696.89. And Particeps Medical Solutions Limited totaled $3,577.41 for a combined total price of $391,296.55, not including HST. Tender 22-T06, supply and delivery of coagulants, with a recommendation that this tender be awarded to Camira Water Solutions Canada Incorporated from Varennes, Quebec, at the total bid price of $437,762 for a 2-year period with the option to renew for an additional 1-year term. Tender 22-T07, water main CIPP lining on various city streets, with a recommendation that this tender be awarded to Furpal Construction Limited from Toronto at the total bid price of $1,532,811.10. Tender 22-T09, supply and equipment for placing hot mix asphalt, with a recommendation that this tender be awarded to GW Ple Paving Limited from St. Andrews West as follows. Section A at the total bid price of $334,197.50, and Section B at a total bid price of $19,775 for the period of approximately May 2nd, 2022 to November 29th, 2022, with the option to renew for an additional 1-year term. Tender 22-T10, supply of hot mix asphalt, with a recommendation that this tender be awarded to Coco Paving from Navan, Ontario, for a 2-year period commencing May 2nd, 2022, with an option for an additional 1-year extension. Tender 22-T12, grass cutting and trimming at various locations. The action recommended is that this tender be awarded as follows. Schedule 1 to 4, EC Works Limited from Long Sault. Schedules 5 to 8, Service Master by Fox from Cornwall. These recommendations represent the low bidder meeting tender specifications, pending equipment review and documentation submission. And Tender 22-T13, grass cutting and trimming at various parks, with a recommendation that this tender be awarded as follows. Schedules 1 to 4 to EC Works Limited from Long Sault. Schedules 5 and 6, Cut by Me, Cornwall, Ontario. And Schedule 7, EC Works Limited, Long Sault. These recommendations represent the low bidder meeting tender specifications, pending equipment review and documentation submission.
Motion to approve the consent agenda. Councilor McDonald, Councilor Dupel, all in favor? Carried, thank you.
We have the new item that was added to the agenda, Mr. Mayor, resolution. It is Resolution 2206, Stand with Asians Coalition Initiative, moved by Councillors Elaine McDonald and Caroline Hébert. Whereas in Cornwall, we espouse diversity and equality among our common values. And whereas racism and discrimination sometimes erupt in actions and words in our community and Canadian society at large. Whereas reports of anti-Asian racism increased by 301% in 2021 in Canada. And whereas CURIA, the Coalition for Unity, Respect, Equality, Equity, and all, works tirelessly to promote racial justice and counter all forms of discrimination through public education. Now therefore be it resolved that we invite Curia to come to the regular council meeting of May 9th to sign the city's Book of Recognition. This gesture on our part will acknowledge the extreme importance of the work they and other equality-seeking groups do in our community, and it will recognize the role of education in creating and supporting social and civic bonds.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know that Curia doesn't specifically limit itself to anti-Asian racism, but they are, I believe, in Cornwall right now, the umbrella group that addresses any issue of racism as they experience it and perceive it in the community. So I think it would be very fitting if we were to invite them to come here and to sign our Book of Recognition. And they would stand for themselves, of course, and for all the other equality-seeking groups, too, who I'm sure are inspired and encouraged by the work that Korea does. And I think a second great objective we would have in honoring Korea in this way is we would be acknowledging the importance of education. So often when we have a difficulty in our community, we know that one recourse, of course, would be to create some legislation or a bylaw. And that's often simply a means to more trouble and more grief. The only real lasting remedy for so many of the things that plague us is education. And since that is the instrument that Korea uses in its work, I think we would have a double benefit by having Korea come and sign our book on the eve of the actual day that's being recognized by communities across the country as a day in which we can work on anti-Asian racism. That's it.
Thank you. Any other comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Residential rental licensing registry, with a recommendation that council not implement a residential rental license registry at this time. Instead, direct administration to use enhanced tools as described in this report.
Motion? Councillor Ebert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move a motion to defer until we've received presentations from both the Landlord Association and the Legal Clinic. If I can get a seconder.
Seconder? Councillor Hollingsworth. Comments?
If I may, just make a few comments. I'm not arguing the licensing program right now, but this is clearly a really important issue, and I think it's something important enough to bring in outside sources from both sides. Both partners have provided us with information, which has been included in our package this evening, but I think for us to do our utmost due diligence in our decision-making, we should have them come and present so that we can ask our questions and have those answered so that we can make the best decision possible for our community. Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Typically, Your Worship, I'm not a big champion of deferring. I tend to kind of think we should get on with it. But in this particular case, whatever we do, it'll be with us for a fairly long time. It's not like one decision and 6 months from now you can kind of change your mind. So recognizing that this is kind of a fairly significant kind of commitment one way or the other. Plus, if I read the report, other municipalities that embrace this are looking at a fair chunk of money. It's not going to be something we're doing for cheap. So if we push ahead with it and we're committing to invest a fair amount of money, I would like to think that I've exhausted every information source available before I kind of make a decision. So, and I think in this case, it's probably better to err on the side of caution or in the side of entertaining as many possible opinions as we can, rather than push ahead and then say, wow, gee, if we'd have known that, we may not have did A or B or whatever the case may be. So I'm going to support the motion to defer.
Councillor McIntosh.
I think the last time we discussed this, there was a financial commitment, just as the CAO, through you, Mr. Mayor. I heard the figure of around 1.1 million. Is that,
I don't think it's out of order because he's, to defer it, he's looking for information.
In our last report to council, we did have a significant dollar amount. It was well in excess of $1 million. Looking at staffing resources that are required alone to work through that process, plus the fee structure that would be involved as well for the property owners. But you're correct, it was certainly in excess of $1 million.
just to address some concerns, I'm voting in favor of the deferral. I'm just trying to ask some questions on financial commitments. That is not in this year's budget.
That is correct.
So could we go ahead with this when it's not in the budget?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so the funding would be subject to conversation. We'd need to get direction from council. I think there's a fair amount of planning that would be required as well to get the program up and running. I think that you'd have to plan for most of that in the year of 2023. We'd have to start to make commitments now. And further, if there were funds that were required this year, then what we typically do with council with projects, if you want to proceed with them in advance of the 2023 budget, we would fund them from our working reserves, and then you'd pay that contribution back in 2023 for the dollars that we expended this year.
So technically, it would be coming out of the 2023 budget. Okay, good, thank you.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support the motion to defer as well. I think this is a very broad program, as Councillor Hebert indicated, and I think the public would appreciate knowing what the parameters of either course of action are. This is a very big step we're contemplating, and I think that the public would like to be in on the facts behind the discussion.
Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will also support the deferral. Going over this report, I had a page of questions I wanted to ask. I've got notes all through the report of things that I wanted to ask. I reached out to Robert Colombe from the health legal clinic, asking for him to elaborate on the report he sent us. I've got some great answers, but I think these answers should be heard publicly. These questions should be asked publicly. There's a lot of, we keep hearing most of the landlords are good landlords, and that's true. But my concern is, how are we going to protect the residents that are living with landlords that aren't? And I just don't see enough in here that I see that's going to protect those particular people. And so if I could hear from both sides, I mean, the Landlord Association has made some good points as well, but and they say they want to be active partners in this, and that's great. I want to know what some of their ideas are to help protect our more vulnerable citizens. So this deferral is absolutely, I think, needed, and the information from both those groups will be welcome. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Gardner.
Yeah, I'll support the deferral. I read through this report. I got emails and phone calls at home about this issue on both sides of the story. And I think it's too important to just say, no, we won't approve it. It's an important issue. There are people who are going to be left in the dark here if we don't defer this and find more answers. And publicly, I want to see that happen. I want the public more involved. The lawyer made some good points. but people who called and emailed me also made good points. I'm going to defer it right now because it's too important to just let it go.
Anybody else? I guess I'm going to speak against the deferral. I believe that we've had plenty of information from both sides, and I think all the information in our package right now, I don't know what else we need to know. It's, but I think it's only fair then if we, and hopefully somebody puts a motion on, that we listen to the landowners association, or landlords association as well, so we get both sides of the story if this does go through. So I don't know what else we're going to learn. Perhaps I had the advantage of having one extra meeting with the legal clinic. So, but I'm not going to support the deferral because I don't think there's anything else to learn. So, anyway, Councillor Hebert.
Yeah, just a point of clarification, my motion does also invite the Landlord Association to present to us so that we can hear both sides and the legal clinic. Yeah,
Sorry,
thank you.
I missed that. All right, all in favor of the deferral? Opposed? Carried, thank you.
Dunkirk Street petition for the removal of the existing sidewalk on the east side of the road, with a recommendation that A, the existing sidewalk on the east side of the road of Dunkirk Street between Vimy Avenue and 12th Street remain in place until the road corridor is reconstructed in the near future. B, that council direct administration to proceed with the reconstruction of Dunkirk Street in accordance with the city's capital plan.
Motion. Councillor Gardner, Councillor McDonald, all in favor? Oh, questions? Councillor Towndale?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. I just wanted some clarification because the report talks about the near future a few times. What is that timeline? Can we get that in years, please?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, within the next 5 years, based off of where the PCR rating is currently, we evaluate the PCR every year, so we'll monitor it as it continues to go down, but within the next 5 years is our time frame we're providing.
Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just an FYI, I'm never going to support the idea of removing sidewalks. I think my track record is obvious on that one. But just quick question to you, Mr. Fothrop. Well, if we were to reconstruct the street, we are at some point going to fix the street. If you were to look at, I did a little quick Googling of the map, if you take a look at that street, because of the way it was built, what, 1946 or 47 or whatever it was, if you were to take a look at that street, so the sidewalk where it is currently located undermines the residents' ability to park, correct? Because it cuts through, and if they park across the sidewalk in the winter, they get a ticket. That sound about right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so the sidewalk on Dunkirk Street is offset like 0.8 meters off the property line, which is standard for city sidewalks.
Right.
What maybe gives the appearance that it is a little further back is that the existing sidewalk is actually too narrow. So it will be, a new sidewalk is much wider, so the boulevard would look reduced.
Well, kind of where I'm going with this is that growing up on 6th Street, corner of 6th and Marlborough, it was sidewalk, then road. So my point, or the question I ask is, Claude knows it well, so is there any way that when we reconstruct that street, could we move the sidewalk closer to the road so that the residents have more driveway to park in before they cross over the sidewalk? Now, I realize that's probably not in keeping with kind of the standard format, but recognizing that they have perhaps a legitimate issue, and I'm trying to kind of have my cake and eat it too here a little bit, and then I want them to potentially have more driveway, which would allow them maybe to park an extra car, but at the same time, I still want to have my sidewalk. So could we kind of move it closer to the road, thereby giving them more driveway to use? Is that possible?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, so offsetting the sidewalk 0.8 meters from the property line is our standard, and the reason we have that is in order to provide enough snow storage in the boulevard to properly maintain the roads and not have to remove snow off of the boulevards. It's something that we look at as we go through the design process. Every case is a little bit different, but we do, that is our standard, and we try to maintain it across the board. But we will try to maximize the space available for parking through the design process while not limiting our ability to maintain the road network.
Thank you. That being said, Your Worship, I realize this is potentially down the road, but certainly I would request of administration or the engineering department in particular that if there's any way we could try to get more driveway and still have our sidewalk, I'd love that. If you're looking for what I'm talking about, Mr. Fothrop, a quick drive down 6th Street between Gloucester and Marlborough, painfully obvious where I'm going with this, but anyway, I'll leave it at that, Your Worship. Thank you.
Anybody else? I know the go ahead, Councillor McDonald.
I was just going to say, I support the recommendation. I believe it means losing the sidewalk on one side, but I think that the explanation is very well laid out here in the exhaustive report that Mr. Fothrop wrote, as he does. So I think I support the recommendation entirely.
All in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you.
We are looking for a motion to receive the unfinished business listing for March 28th, 2022.
Motion? Councillor Gardner, Councillor DePel, all in favor? Carried, thank you.
Moving on to communication items, 2021 Drinking Water Quality Report, with a recommendation that council receive this report.
Motion? Councillor Towndale, Councillor McDonald, all in favor? Carried, thank you.
COVID-19 vaccine policy, with a recommendation that council amend the policy as presented.
Motion? Councillor DePel, second by Councillor Gardner. Any questions?
Just a comment, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Jeff, thank you very much for the report, Jeff. It was thorough and well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Towndale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, questions that occurred to me. So the amendment suggests that we require all employees, future employees, to be vaccinated against COVID-19. I just want to be sure that we have a legal opinion on this. And I also have a follow-up question. If we do this for other diseases or viruses, do we require proof of vaccination for anything else?
We did not ask for official legal opinion on this, but as it has been reviewed by our lawyers and moving forward, it's the same policy without all the protections as currently anybody that's coming into the facility as a new employee needs to be vaccinated as per provincial standards right now. I would have to, I don't think we do ask for other ones, but I would have to find out. I've never asked specifically that question.
Thank you. Is it possible just to confirm that then?
Confirm the vaccination?
Yes.
It's just through an email, like back to, yeah, by all means.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you.
Cornwall Curling Club request to access funds with the following recommendation: that council approve the withdrawal of $42,477 from the Recreation Facilities Reserve and transfer these funds to the Cornwall Curling Club to offset some of the cost to replace a failed ice plant compressor once the club has fulfilled its obligation of the purchase of service agreement, and B, provide direction regarding what council expects from the club as it pertains to outstanding documentation for the years 2017 through 2021.
Councillor Gardner, you moving the motion? Councillor McDonald, perhaps we can have an explanation from Madame CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think as it's outlined in the report, there have been several years where the curling club has not provided audited financial statements, so per the agreements that's in place, that is a requirement. So administration is looking for direction. Our last financial statements that were audited were for the year ending April 30th, 2016. I think that we recognize that there is a certain expense to audited financial statements. However, I think for a organization that the municipality provides support to, it's a public facility, that is a standard requirement within our agreements. I would recommend to council that for the year that's just about to end, that we require them to engage, I would say, sign an engagement letter with an auditor in the community. If we get that in place for the upcoming audit and they provide audit statements on a go-forward basis, perhaps that is reasonable for council to consider and something that I think our administration would support as well.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Perhaps a question first, if I might, Your Worship, per CAO. Do we have, I think I know the answer, but do we have other organizations where we have kind of a similar type of scenario? So for example, I'm thinking the Altsville Theatre type deal where we have like an MOU, we give them money, they run it. I realize it may not be quite the same, but is it safe to say that that's similar in the nature of how it operates?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. And with all of those types of agreements, audited statements are a requirement.
Okay, that's where I was going. So everybody else is expected to provide an audited financial statement, correct?
Correct.
So that being said, Your Worship, at least as one member, if everybody else is expected to provide an audited financial statement, then I think it's only fair that the Cornwall Curling Club provide an audited financial statement. Furthermore, we're talking based on page 216 in our, for those of you doing paper, we're looking at around, based on the report here, $4,800 for an audited statement. What the Cornwall Curling Club suggested was $2,800. So we're talking $2,000. It's not like we're bleeding the club here financially. I mean, I don't know what their membership fees are, but 500 members divvied up $2,000. I don't see it being particularly financially onerous. And the other thing, Your Worship, that's noteworthy is John Q. Public, in fact, many of the members of that club would be the first ones to suggest that City Council needs to be accountable to the public for all of the dollars that we spend. Accountability is the new buzzword of the new millennium in terms of government, and a financial statement is arguably the most accountable document you can provide. So that being said, as far as one member, if admin is looking for direction from me, and I don't know how my colleagues feel, but I think they have a pretty reasonable arrangement there. We ask for audited statements from other organizations. Don't think we're putting an undue strain in terms of how we treat everybody else. So in equity and accountability, then I think a financial audit statement for the years in question and moving forward is not an unreasonable request. So if I were to make a motion in the future, I would ask to continue with audited financial statements. Thank you.
Well, Councillor Hollingsworth, part of this motion is to give direction to administration. So
that being said, Your Worship, are you looking for, like, I mean, we have a motion on the floor. it doesn't say what we want. My colleague basically supported the recommendations, but recommendation number 2 doesn't really, it's not really doesn't say anything. So how would you like us to proceed?
I think we should have it as a requirement to give the funds for the compressor that they have to provide audited financial statements for, say, 2021.
Okay, now, that being said, as a matter of procedure, recognizing we have a motion on the floor, would it not be incumbent upon the mover and seconder to add that as part of their motion? Or do we vote for this motion, then make a subsequent motion, like I'm looking to our clerk?
I would recommend that you withdraw the original motion and provide direction
Well,
to administration.
that's up to the mover and seconder then, your worship.
Mr. Mayor, as long as it's clear that in the original motion, and that's inserted in it, that they do an audit, that has to be spelled out. It's not spelled out in B. It just says outstanding. Under the contract that we have with them, they have to give us an audit. I don't want to give them an excuse, but they were shut down during COVID for the last 2 years, so I don't know if that's the reason that it wasn't given to us, but I want B to show that they need to give us an audit copy.
Well, I think Councillor Hollingsworth was indicating that they do have a audit financial statement, and I'm just suggesting for the year 2021, if that's good with the mover. No, I'm talking about the intent of your motion.
Can I ask for the motion that's on the floor to be read then as to what we're voting for, your worship?
So as I understand it, we were looking to the mover and seconder to include the direction of providing audited financial statements for the year 2021. Am I understanding correctly?
Mr. Mayor, maybe I could make a recommendation.
Okay, Madame CEO.
So council, I think, could either look to amend the motion that's on the floor or withdraw that motion and make a new motion to make it clean. So I think that council's in agreement to proceed with A, to provide the funding. And my recommendation would be for the direction for B, to provide direction to administration to make requirement for audited financial statements for the fiscal year ending April 30th, 2022, which is part of 2022, as an audit engagement. And I think that if they were to engage with the firm and provide an engagement letter or a copy of an engagement letter to administration, then that would be sufficient for us to turn around and provide advance of the funds for the equipment that they need to proceed with.
Just look, before we, do you agree with the content of?
I think so. If I could just have it read specifically so I know what I'm raising my hand for. It sounds fine to me, your worship. I could just get it so I know exactly what I'm saying yes to, if that's okay.
Clerk, do you have the content of that?
Yeah, so the part A is okay with everyone. It's part B that you're looking for?
Yeah, admin's looking for a direction.
So that council provide direction to administration to obtain audited financial statements for the fiscal period ending April 30th, 2022, with an audit engagement letter to be submitted.
Now, if I might, one more question. Does that satisfy what you need, Madam CEO, in your opinion, to move forward?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, I think so. I think the difficulty for them, it's difficult for an organization to go back too many years and have an audit engagement done on.
Okay.
And I think understanding what we're trying to accomplish, I think that's a reasonable approach.
Okay, that being said, then one member, I can support the motion on the floor, your worship.
So we need a seconder for that. Councillor McDonald, pardon? Councillor McIntosh.
The motion, I would like to see, why don't we just say we need audited statements? Why are we saying until 2022? Does it mean after 2022, you don't have to give us
No,
audited
this-
statements anymore?
No, on a go-forward basis, they have to. We have to
Yeah.
deal with the years in the past that we have not received audited financial statements.
Okay, that's fine. Just for clarification, I'm no longer a member of the current club, and I think there are two other people in this council also used to be, are former members, so we're not speaking on behalf of the club. That decision, I think, with the audit, not to give audit statements, was made before COVID, had nothing to do with COVID. Their funds, that capital fund, will be depleted. So it's back where we started years ago. What happens if something major, you know, it's a building that's getting older. If the fund is zero and something major happens, where we go from there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that there would be, there'd be an advantage if some of our administration met with some of the executive of the curling club, because the amount of money that they're contributing to that reserve, really in lieu of property taxes, is not sufficient from a capital asset management plan perspective, right? It probably should be easily double that or more.
Mm-hmm.
But it could be something that could be built up over time or phased in. I am not familiar with the organization. We don't have statements, so I'm not familiar with their revenues or their membership. But perhaps if we went through that exercise, we might be able to see if there's an opportunity for a slightly larger contribution each year, depending on their membership and their ability.
Mm-hmm. The other question is that if this was in the agreement when the club opened and they stopped having audited statements in 2017, why wouldn't we have asked the question, where's your audited statement from 2017?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so we have sent several letters to the curling club requesting audited financial statements, and we have not. I'm going to look to Mrs. Bailey, but I do not believe that we've received any replies from the curling club. So I think that there's been a reluctance to engage in an audit and provide those statements.
Yeah. So they were aware that we were looking for audit statements.
We have
wasn't,
corresponded
something
with
where,
them.
well, we haven't heard from the city, so we'll just let it go. Okay, that sounds fair.
If I can put some clarification on this. I was on the board of the curling club, and they were well aware of the commitment. They basically, when I was on the board, they just didn't fulfill the obligations of the contract. I met today with a bookkeeper, one of the members of the current board, and they're going to be supplying audit statements. And we also discussed the need for looking at how they can get other revenues for the capital projects in case something else happened. So there's a new board, and I think that they're very willing to fulfill the obligations of their contract. But I think a motion from council is important to show that we require this information for their protection and for ours, because it is our building. So I think it's important, but they have a new executive, a new board, and I think they are more than willing to fulfill the obligations to their contract. But I think this motion will go a long way to demonstrate that council is it's insistent that they fulfill the obligations. And a unanimous vote on this would be very good, in my estimation. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As one member of the Grants Committee, I can tell you if another organization came to us the year after we gave them money without their financial statements, they don't get money the following year. So understanding that obviously the curling club plays a valuable role in our community for quality of life and you know, in some ways tourism. So it's not like we can just not provide them the money to get this fixed. But I hope they realize the seriousness of not providing our financial statements, because going forward, now that we've had this conversation, unacceptable to do this again. To say that maybe it was COVID, yeah, it was 2017. It was a long time before COVID. So I can tell you, as some of the members around the grants committee, we've had many conversations about not letting people move forward a year after not providing their financial statements. We've even gone so far as to contact them and say, hey, you forgot your financial statements, and extended it a month or two, but at least we got those statements. So I hope they realize the situation they put themselves into, and I'm glad to hear from you that you spoke to them that they plan on fulfilling their obligations going forward, but 5 years without is pretty unacceptable to me.
Councillor Towndale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the risk of sounding redundant, I think Councillor Bennett puts a fine point on it. I was thinking the same thing, but before there even was a grants committee, when it was all of council, I recall discussions where we didn't receive financial statements from any organization in the city, and we would be willing to cut off funding entirely. I do find it concerning to hear that they were aware of their obligation, they just decided not to do it, if I understood your remarks correctly, Mr. Mayor. But I'm hoping moving forward we can remedy this, get audits for at least the past year, maybe 2, and then going forward we'll have this. This isn't something to be taken lightly. There's a reason why we require this information. And, you know, this is a position now where, you know, the capital fund's going to be potentially exhausted, and there needs to be a way forward. So we need to, in my opinion, need to see the accounting to see what the remedy is for that. It is our building at the end of the day, and if there's no money to fix it, that could be a serious problem going forward, because it's true, the curling club does provide a valuable service to this community, and you know, with the hosting of the Shorty Jenkins, that's a big event. Plus there's been other events here with Curling Ontario, I believe it was, came, and they had a tournament here. So there's a lot going on, and it is a great facility, a great club, but you know, when it comes to this sort of thing, the administration's important, the paperwork's important. This sort of thing has to get done. So I look forward to this being fixed moving forward, but I am concerned that it lapsed for 5 years. Thank you.
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Richard. I think we have to, don't let us forget that the curling club was built through the cooperation of the curling club and the city of Cornwall.
Mike, please.
Mike.
Sorry. It's like the curling club took a curling. But Mrs. Adams had the solution to this, this problem that we have now, that she's willing to go and talk to the curling club and find out exactly what the problem is and tell them to continue the partnership we always enjoyed with them for the future. These things have to happen. They're all professional people that work in that, that are members of the curling club. My good friend sitting over here was past member, but not too long ago. You better curl up. Was it stones too heavy for you now? But he understands the kind of facility it is and how difficult it was to get it built in the first place, and everybody was all proud of it. They've obviously having some problems right now, and I think, Mrs. Adams, you know exactly what's needed from them, and I think you'd want, part of the discussion tonight, you said leave it with, you didn't say leave it with you, but you said you could sort out the mess that's there with the financial problems that they have. And I think that's the best way. Hold everything off till you can come back and say, you spoke to the curling club, this is how they're willing to work with us to get it, the financial problems fixed. It would be a terrible shame if we lose the curl. I'm not a curler. I think I've curled twice in my life. It's not, it's not something I'm, like my friend, or Mr. McIntosh, I'm not a professional retired curler, but, hey?
Talk to the motion. Talk to the motion, Dennis.
I was a pro in this stuff. So, Maureen, would you be willing to go and meet with the curling club and straighten out this mess?
We will follow up and meet with the curling club.
Okay, thank you.
All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Carried. Unanimous. Thank you.
Our next item is the new business motion, eviction of tenants in apartment buildings. Now therefore be it resolved that council ask administration to come back to council with a report that outlines the legalities of creating a bylaw that would limit the number of residents that can be evicted at the same time from larger residential properties that are going through the process of renovations. Moved by councillors Bennett and Gardner.
Discussion? Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think it's any secret that the situation at Cumberland Gardens is what brought this on. Certainly opened my eyes to the issue of renovictions. There's a word that rolls right off the tongue, renovictions. It's basically an organization decides that they're going to, in this particular instance, renovate the entire building at the same time and kick 92 families out into the streets. 92 families that are going to need to find affordable housing for their families in a city right now that has a housing crunch, like most cities are having housing crunches. Those 92 affordable, safe family units just aren't available right now. It's unacceptable that a corporation would move into any community and kick out a large number of residents into the streets for the sole purpose of increasing their profits. The way they did this, and are doing it, is they've handed out eviction notices that basically aren't worth the paper they're written on. But the residents at the time didn't know what their rights were, and they thought they were going to be homeless. They've had some meetings with our legal clinic since. They've been provided some advice, but at the same time, this could go all the way to the Landlord-Tenant Board Association, and they could very well rule in their favor. This organization, in their letters to those residents, said that they need to do necessary repairs, and that's why they needed to kick everybody out. It is impossible to repair 92 units at the same time. There wouldn't be enough workers in a city to do that. And if there was, it wouldn't take 7 months, which is what this letter said, 7 months or more. 7 months or more, 92 families have to find another place to live. The eviction notice was handed out by a gentleman who went door to door and handed them the notice. This gentleman now goes door to door or yells at the residents from the sidewalk that there's no way they're going to win this. Give up your fight. You will not win. How would you like that? You were just told you have to move out so they can do a renoviction, and now the guy is walking around and hassling these people and trying to scare them into just leaving. These residents need to know that their right is to move back into that unit at the same cost. But I think what we need to be doing is, in the case of a renoviction, I think the limits need to be set. We can't just allow something like this to happen, even if every tenant moved out, it was kicked out, and it got to that point. It can't be allowed to happen. It's just not safe for a community to let that many families walk out into the streets all at the same time. And I would be looking for the legal opinion on what we can do to limit that. And just off the top of my head, for something I would be considering would be any unit, any property owner that has more than, say, 20 units could only evict 20% of the tenants at a time to do their renovictions. It's a lot easier to house, 15 families than it is 92 families, or 20 families instead of 92 families. And it gives the opportunity for them to go into an apartment with a smaller number they're doing to get it done faster so that family can get back in faster. So they only need to find a place to live for a few weeks or a few months. So I'm really just looking for administration to come back with legal opinions on what we can do to limit renovictions. It seems to be the new thing. This company has done it several times in the last few years. People from their last project in Oshawa have reached out to some of the tenants at this property saying that they fought back and once they learned their rights and were able to maintain their units. But it should never be to that point in the first place. So I'm hoping my colleagues will agree that this is something that we need to action. I realize that this is a provincial kind of a matter, but the province is basically just standing with the residents. Thanks. What we need is action for the residents. So if they're not going to do it, then I think we need to look at what we can do to do it so that our residents can feel protected in the homes that they're in now. I hope I can have your support.
Councillor Ebert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank Councillor Bennett for bringing this forward. This is critical right now. The city needs to step in some way, shape, or form. Not sure what that is, but I think this is a really great step. There's a process to evict a tenant. Notice, a payout, whatnot. It seems as though these property owners have attempted to follow those rules, but those rules need to be amended or changed when it's a mass group like this, or if we're in a housing crisis, which we absolutely are in. 92 households are being told to find somewhere else to live. There's not 92 units to rent today in the city of Cornwall, let alone affordable units. These are individuals who've been living there for a significant amount of time, are enjoying a fairly low rate, and then them moving anywhere else would obviously see an increase in the rent, significant increase. So the process needs to change, the rules need to change, there needs to be an amendment, and I know that's beyond the municipality to really change eviction process, but there is something we can do, there must be something we can do, especially in such a crisis. I'm happy to support this motion and happy to hear any other recommendations administration might want to come forward with, whether it be, temporary housing for, the percentage that need to move, because they can take their units back. That is their right. And finding temporary housing will be another part of the crisis. So I'd love to hear from administration what other opportunities might be available. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I seconded this motion because, thank you, Councillor Bennett, for what you said. I won't repeat what you said. I attended that first public meeting at the Legion, and the next day I contacted Monica Turner, the Director of Policy for AMO. AMO will continue to ask the province to take appropriate steps so that this does not continue to happen to families throughout Ontario. AMO's aware of it, and they're trying to do something with the province, number one. Number two, I had an 8-page answer to my email to AMO, which is available to anyone who wants it. But New Westminster, BC, and Toronto both are looking at a bylaw to stop this renovictions from happening in Canada. I also spoke to Eric Duncan, who wrote a scathing letter to these people. I sent him a copy, or gave him a copy, forwarded it to him, a copy of what the reaction was from AMO, and also gave him people that he could contact for further information. So thanks for Council Bennett for bringing that up, and I know there was an awful lot of fear in that first meeting until we got some lawyer involved, and now hopefully AMO will turn this around. Apparently New Westminster has a bylaw in place, or was preparing a bylaw to stop this from happening. So this is the connection that I can give to you, Madam CAO, or anybody else who wants to call them and find out how can they push this forward. Thank you.
Councillor DePel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I would just like to publicly thank Councillor Bennett as well. I was really pleased to read the motion. I think that what's happening is totally 100% unacceptable, and especially in the times that, not only are we going through a pandemic, but we're going through a housing crisis. And as my colleagues have said this evening, you're not going to find affordable or even accessible housing to house all these people who are being evicted during this mass eviction. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Madam CEO, I'm just wondering, as far as Councillor Bennett's motion goes, what would be a reasonable timeline before we're able to hear something back?
CEO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure how long it would take. It likely would not come back at the next meeting. So if we're going to engage legal counsel, also take a look at what a couple of other municipalities are doing, we're likely going to need a couple of weeks to work on this. So the soonest we might be able to bring it back would be the end of April, or the second meeting in April, I should say.
All right, thank you, Madam CEO. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor McDonald?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Seems to me that one factor to this property that might give us some room to actually enact legislation, like in terms of a bylaw, is the fact that there are separate buildings here. I don't know how many exactly, but we could suggest, you know, when you've got a multi-building property, that going through one property at a time makes more sense, especially in terms of availability of laborers and tradespeople. That makes more sense to clear out one building at a time, which, as somebody suggested, maybe 20% of the residents rather than 100% would give us a chance to, you know, to allow renovation to occur without mass eviction. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor McIntosh?
Yeah, there aren't 90, as Todd said, there aren't 92, 95 units in this town. I think Carrie Lynn and Morris work in the social services business, and they know that just putting food on the table can be a challenge at times. I can't fathom the idea of competing with 92 other families to find a unit, and the idea that they can come back. Who's going to rent you a decent place without a lease? You know, to say I just need a place for 9 months, that's even makes it even worse. Councillor Bennett talked about that they had received legal advice, and I'm just wondering, I think you indicated that the legal advice was that the eviction notice wasn't worth the paper it was written on. Just wondering if you can expand on that.
So basically, a proper eviction notice has to come from landlord-tenant association and delivered basically by a sheriff to have somebody actually removed. So basically what they did was drew up an eviction notice style letter, making an offer of paying them out for 3 months' rent if they leave, or more if they leave earlier. And what they're accounting on is that the residents don't know their rights, and that they'll just jump on that offer because it's 3 months worth of rent and they'll be able to go somewhere else. Or even if they do come back, what they're hoping with a letter like this is to scare everybody out so that they can do their renovations and bring people back in at maybe double the rents. When you look at some of those places where people are paying, double or more is probably not out of the question. So yeah, the paper that they delivered to them, according to the legal clinic at a meeting we had at the Legion, was basically not worth anything.
Okay. The reason why I asked that is that a bylaw being retroactive, I guess that was one of the questions you would ask BLG, is that can we pass a bylaw that can be retroactive to, you know, I assume the company's going to say our notice was okay, nothing wrong with it, it was quite legal. To take a bylaw and back it up could be a challenge.
I think trying to have a bylaw that is backdated would be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can inquire, but I wouldn't want to comment on that or give council the interpretation that that is a likelihood without researching it further with legal counsel.
Yeah, there are there's one major landlord in town, a corporation, that is doing something, a renovation job on a major apartment complex. They've been at it for the last 3 or 4 years. And I understand they're moving 2 at a time. They're taking their time going through the building. And I just wonder why these folks couldn't do the same thing. It's not the same. Some people think it's the same company. It's not. It's not DevCorp. Anyway, yeah, we look at the bylaw. It's my heart goes out to these people. You know, especially folks with a couple of kids. You know, I just couldn't imagine getting this notice and how it really must upset your life. And, the mental anguish that goes with it is, I can't calculate it because I've never been in that position. So I, go with the bylaw. I think BLG is going to give us a quick answer on that one, a yes or no. And I've got to wonder where the Ministry of Housing is in all of this. I was just talking about the Ford government, governments before that. You know, these guys didn't invent this. This has been going on for a long time. So I really hope that these folks can find a solution that works out in their favor.
Anybody else? Councillor Carr.
Well, I think, I had this discussion, and I heard Todd, when you were talking about, you've obviously had contact with these people, and you have a better understanding than I do what's going on. But I think we all have to know exactly what is happening, what is the actions that the landlord is taking, can they do it? If not, what is it the law prevents them from doing, the law allows them to do, whatever it is. But we've got to be sure of what it's all about. And did we ask Mrs. Adams to nominate someone from her staff to find out what's happening? I mean, we use lawyers all the time for other things. Surely we can use lawyers in this particular case and get the truth and bring it to council as quickly as we can, and then we can talk about it to see if there is, in fact, a role that we can play or help that we can give to these poor people who are being thrown out. It just doesn't seem right. It doesn't sit well with anyone. I was thinking about the old hotel, the general hospital. How many beds are in there?
Through the chair. Through the chair.
How many beds are in the general hospital?
I have no idea.
No idea. Okay, that's well. But I think that might be a solution of some kind, because they do have the beds in there. Someone should check it out.
Another problem. Anybody else? Well, no, we already spoke once, sorry.
So if you're going around the second time,
No, we're
I'd
not.
like to, well,
No.
I'm asking.
I'll support the motion, because if we can do this, it may not impact this, but it'll be another tool in our toolbox to prevent this reoccurrence. Also, Councilor Bennett, with that person, I saw the video, that person harassing that. Now, were the authorities brought into that?
From what I understand, the police were called, but I have no idea what came of it, because it's clearly harassment.
Well, you've got the chair of the police board. Anyway, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Moving on to the bylaws, Mr. Mayor. Bylaws 2022-35 to 42 inclusive, listed on the agenda, are being presented to council for adoption.
Motion, Councilor Bennett, Councilor McDonald, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
And moving on, Mr. Mayor, to the reports from standing, advisory, special, and ad hoc committees of council.
Councilor McDonald?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to give council an update on the fundraising for the Be the Link Committee for the Arts and Culture Center in Cornwall. The grand total, after a yard sale that we had this weekend to do a pre-construction clear out of the premises, sits now at $1,123,992.70.
That's amazing. Good. Anybody else? Thank you. Next.
Then the confirming bylaw is being presented to council for adoption, Mr. Mayor.
Motion, Councilor Bennett, Councilor Hebert. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Motion to adjourn. Councilor Bergeron, Councilor Towndale. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thanks. Good meeting.